Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our live meditation questions and answers. I'll be answering questions typed in the YouTube chat during this stream. If you're catching this afterwards, well, you can just sit back and listen. If you'd like to ask a question, please put at Yuttadhammo Bhikkhu as at the beginning. It makes it easier for me to see. If you're new here, the way we do this is, if you don't have a question, close your eyes. Focus on your experience. The hearing, the sound of my voice. Just say to yourself, hearing, hearing. Focus on the sitting posture. Say sitting, sitting. Focus on any other experiences that come up. If there's nothing else, just focus on the stomach rising and falling. Say rising, falling. If you do have a question, try and type your question mindfully and then close your eyes. You don't have to wait for me to answer with your eyes open. You don't have to read the other questions other people have written. Please don't chat in the chat box. It's not actually chat. It's for asking questions. Am I really too quiet? I shouldn't be. So if I'm too quiet, you probably got your sound turned down. I may not be as loud as you'd like me to be, but just turn your sound up. If I go any louder, it'll probably spike. So I'm not going to answer all questions. If I'm not answering your question, it might be my own fault. It might be the fault of your question. It's just the way things are. We don't always harmonize in our expectations. Try and be mindful of the fact that your question didn't get answered and how you feel about that. Take that as an object of meditation. Don't blame yourself. Don't blame me. It's just the way things are. But I'm going to try to answer questions that don't have an immediate answer of read my booklet. Because if you haven't read the booklet, go ahead and read that. It's your best bet to get a sense on the sorts of answers I would give, advice I would give to people. There should be a link to the booklet in the description of this video. But I'm going to try to answer questions that don't have an immediate answer there and that have some relation to meditation, or that have relation to states of mind, things that can be addressed with meditation. Like this question. This question is, the core answer is still, if you read my booklet, go ahead and read that. It should help you. Guilt is, so the question is, do you have advice for someone experiencing survivor's guilt or other guilt? Certain kinds of guilt can be actually useful. If you do something wrong to hurt someone else, you feel guilty about it, that can drive you to change. But it doesn't really matter. In the practice of Satipatthana, you take it as an object of meditation. So implicit in this sort of question is often, how do I get rid of it, It's not really in the question. It's just that part of the problem is often that we approach these sorts of issues in terms of how to get rid of the feeling. And even if something is bad, we're not trying to get rid of it. And that's simply because trying to get rid of something is productive of bad habits. It's productive of aversion, you see. When you try to get rid of things, even bad things, you become averse to them, and that's a bad habit in itself. You give power to them, really. Trying to get rid of things, it's a surefire way to make them worse. If you face them head on. It's like a game of chicken. I think I have to stop using that analogy because the game of chicken is pretty awful. But you face it head on and it moves. It's like a stare down. Stare it down and it blinks. How do you maintain calm during this craziness in the world? Well, the same sort of thing. This is the other side of the coin. Wanting to keep good experiences, like calm, or create good experiences. And again, not really what we're about. And it seems counterintuitive because obviously the touted goal of meditation is to get rid of the bad and give rise to the good. But the trick is that the way it does this is by not trying, by not focusing on the goal, right? Not focusing on the change that you want to bring. Not looking at reality in terms of problems that have to be fixed. Or solutions that have to be brought about. Instead, looking at reality in terms of experiences that have to be understood. See reality in that way. So rather than trying to maintain calm, focus on the anxiety. Because implicit in this question is the fact that you're not always calm. If you are always calm, you wouldn't have to ask this question, right? It would just be calm all the time, and you wouldn't have to ask how to maintain it. But you can see that, because maintaining things is delusion. It's an illusion. You don't maintain them; they persist, or they don't persist. And what you're seeing is they don't persist based on our desire for them to persist. We don't control them. This is the core characteristic of reality we call non-self. That's what you're seeing. This question is, well, how do I release the control of the breath when I am so focused on it during vipassana meditations? Is related to control, related to the last, what I just said. But this is a really important question. A lot of these questions I've answered time and again, so some of you who are coming back are probably getting the sense that I'm just saying the same thing over again, and you want me to talk about new things. Why don't we have new topics? Well, it's first of all good to hear the same things over and over again, and second of all, you don't need to hear a lot. People who watch hundreds and hundreds of my YouTube videos, it's amazing that I even have hundreds and hundreds, but who watch hundreds and hundreds of YouTube videos, maybe not just mine, there's lots of them out there, right? Certainly not just mine. There are many Buddhist videos out there. Many, many, many. With the idea that watching lots of videos is going to help you practice. It's good to listen, but it's much better to practice what you've learned. And so if you're craving for more teaching, then perhaps you have to start looking at the craving and less at the teaching. Anyway, this the person asking this one perhaps hasn't heard me talk about this, but I don't think I talk about it a lot. It's an important topic that has to be talked about. So there's the perception of control when you breathe. Right? And that's because of this prevalent characteristic or prevalent habit, mental habit, to obsess over things. Watching the stomach, first of all, in our tradition, we don't exactly focus on the breath. We're focusing on the stomach moving. But when you do that, it's going to show you all of your habits, particularly habits related to objects, physical objects. Our relationship with objects is quite often one of trying to control them. And that's what you see when you focus on the stomach. As you would with anything else that you focus on, you immediately begin to try to control it. We do this with people, places, with situations. No. If something's too loud, you try and tell someone to quiet down. Something's too quiet, you tell them to speak up. If it's too hot, you turn down the heat. If it's too cold, you turn up the heat. If you're in pain, you shift, you adjust your position. And on and on. I mean, in everything really. We're hardwired, it seems, to try and control. Turns out it's not hardwired, it's just habit. And we do that with the stomach. So the stomach, when it's not perfectly smooth, which it won't be, it begins to stress us. Look, there's a stress that's created, an anxiety and upset. And it appears that we're trying to control, when in fact we're just getting upset about it. We're stressing, and then there's tension in the stomach and so on, because the mind is obsessing over it. And so you shouldn't look at it as the trying to control. Don't worry too much about that. It's good to see that you're trying to control, but focus on it more as the stress and the tension. So when you feel stress and tension and so on, because that's what you're at. That's why you're asking. Why we ask this question, why this is a common question, is because it's unpleasant. And that's the whole idea of non-self. Not only is it true, but it's important. Because trying to control, as you can see, causes stress and suffering. And so just say to yourself, tense, or stressed, or unpleasant, or disliking. Focus on the disliking of it. And you'll see it will start to change. You'll stop getting so obsessed over it. You'll stop stressing about it because you see how much pain and unpleasantness that brings. How can I overcome procrastination? I get this question every so often. I mean, I think simply, again, just meditate, and it may not seem like the obvious answer, but the thing about procrastination, it doesn't really exist. There exist certain qualities of mind that lead to what appears to be a state of procrastination, meaning there are certain qualities of mind that are inefficient, that inhibit productivity. Sometimes that's actually a good thing. Sometimes our productivity is the problem, our need for productivity, our desire for productivity is actually the problem. So if we want to get rich, or we want to do all sorts of things, be ambitious in the world, we want to be successful in our job, we want to be fit, so exercise and that sort of thing. So it often depends what you're procrastinating. Sometimes mindfulness will even make you not just procrastinate, but it'll make you unable to do certain things, because you just deep down you realize, you understand, or you see. No, it's not intellectual. You just naturally are unable to do certain things, or put out effort or enthusiasm for certain things, because they're useless. Because you experience, your clarity of mind shows you that they're useless. And so it feels like you're unable to have the get up and go to do certain things. But quite often it's just laziness or aversion, or that sort of thing. And meditation will get rid of those, and you'll find makes you quite able to accomplish so much more than before you practice meditation. And procrastination isn't really an issue, because it's not it's the things that are causing it, the inhibitors. In Satipatthana, why does the Buddha call the body, thought, etc. as frame of reference? He does not call them object of meditation. How is frame of reference different than object of meditation? Frame of reference is a translation of one specific monk, one specific Buddhist meditation teacher, who I'm often a bit critical of publicly, which I feel kind of bad about, because he's a really good monk, I think. I don't think he's a very good translator, unfortunately. And so unless you follow his tradition, I wouldn't recommend using his translation. So if you ever come across this frame of reference as a translation of Satipatthana, I think it's a very bad translation. Objectively, I'm not the only one who thinks so, which also doesn't say anything. He may be right, but you'd have to follow his tradition. I disagree with that translation very much. Sati doesn't mean reference. Patthana doesn't mean frame. Patthana or upatthana, he makes a good argument that it's upatthana, which is right, I think. I don't know, I think he's probably right. But upatthana means establishing, or establishment. And sati means remembrance, literally. Memory or remembrance. So, which, it doesn't really mean anything either. It's not immediately evident what that means, but establishing means a practice. So satipatthana is a practice. Satipatthana doesn't refer specifically to the object, but in regards to the those four things, you have a certain activity. There's the establishment of sati in regards to the body, kaya, the feelings, vedana, the mind, citta, and the dhammas, dhamma. And so it's like focus. Upatthana is like focus. It's like determination. Don't know why he used that word, because it's 2,500 years ago in a different language. the way of speaking was a little bit different, and we often have to interpret or figure out what they meant. But it's quite clear what he means because he describes what he means. You dwell seeing Kaya as Kaya, or in Kaya you see Kaya, in the body you see body. And that's what sati means. Sati means to remember, so literally means to remember. But the point here is to remember that that's all it is. Or more clearly, I suppose, to remember it as opposed to forgetting it in favor of your reactions to it. So when you have an experience of body, feelings, mind, Dhamma, the immediate result usually is a reaction, and so you get caught up in a reaction. Even our reactions, we react to them. You get angry about something and then it snowballs. You get angry about it and you feed off the anger. So mindfulness or sati means to just remember it, to remember, to bring the mind back to it. So that we say to ourselves, pain, for example, brings you back to it just as pain, as opposed to letting it go on and getting caught up in your reactions. So I don't think the word frame of reference does justice to the word satipatthana, specifically because it misses the whole meaning of the word sati. And further because, I don't know how, I think he has an explanation of how he comes to that, but the point is I wouldn't use the word the phrase frame of reference to refer to satipatthana. So they're not, a lot of people translate them as foundations of mindfulness, and that makes them objects. And they are objects of meditation. But the Buddha, I think, used a bit of a different, he talked about the objectifying, really, of them. You objectify these things. So satipatthana doesn't mean an object of meditation, it means the objectification, which is really just a technical, for all intents and purposes, you could call them objects of meditation. But the Buddha talked about it as a verb, as an activity of establishing mindfulness. And I guess that's what upatthana also implies, this, setting yourself on that actual experience of them, as opposed to getting lost. Upatthana is the sense of standing firm, right? Ta, the root ta means to stand. And so upatthana means to stand firm upon them, as opposed to getting lost in your conceptualizing of what they're like or what you think of them and so on. I want to do some Dhamma study besides my meditation practice. If I don't want to read anything that conflicts with your teaching, any advice on what to read? Well, I appreciate that. I guess I have to qualify it by saying I'm not the be-all, end-all on what the Dhamma is. But I do try, perhaps more than some others try, to be orthodox. Perhaps less than some others. But my take on things is that the Buddha's teaching and I guess more importantly, because this is where we often differ, the teaching of the ancient followers of the Buddha in the commentaries, the Theravada commentaries, are also worth listening to, for the most part. And so I try, I've seen teachers who, my teachers, the three teachers that I tend to follow. And it wasn't intentionally that I should just stick to these three, but they do stand out for me. I can't find others that really hit it like they do. Are Mahasi Sayadaw, Lumpo Chodok, and Ajahn Tong. And the first two have written a lot. Ajahn Tong didn't write a lot, or much at all really. But I spent a lot of time with him, so that's why I include him, of course. But the other two wrote a lot, and particularly the Mahasi Sayadaw, his books were translated into English. And so I recommend to anyone, if you haven't, read everything he wrote. Everything he wrote or was written as a transcription. But I think he had a hand in pretty much everything that was published. Because he's spot on, I think, in my opinion. Not I think, I'm sure. And so if you believe me, then absolutely he is spot on. Beyond Mahasi Sayadaw, the Mahasi Sayadaw Lumpur Chodok stuff is all in Thai, so unless you speak Thai, it's not really much help. If you speak Sinhalese, there's this apparently a really good teacher. I can't verify, but I'm confident. Rerukarne Chandawimala. Is that his name? Rerukarne. I think it's Chandevu. Why am I doubting that now? Anyway, Rerukarne something or other. That's the place where he lived. But in English, behind that, absolutely read the Buddha's teaching. We're lucky to have a really good translation of the Buddha's teaching by Bhikkhu Bodhi, who has translated 3 of the 5 Nikayas. And the Nikayas are the main parts of the Sutta Pitaka, and I recommend reading all 3 of those, plus the Maurice Walsh, which is the 4th one. He translated the Digha Nikaya. So that's 4 Nikayas. The 5th Nikaya is lots of small ones, but there are translations of pieces of it as well. It's not as imperative that you read it because there's a lot of different things in it. It's great to read as well, but it's a little more scattered. And unfortunately, those translations, you have to pay for them. The great thing about the other translations that are on the net is they're free. There are translations, or there are versions of the paid translations that you can find on the internet, though they are technically illegal to it's illegal to copy them. So if you're concerned about those things, you're out of luck. You have to buy them. All right, enough on that question, I think. How does consciousness appear to the meditator? When noting experiences, I can't see the experience and the awareness of it as 2 separate experiences. Well, it's because they're not. Experience contains both, and otherwise it wouldn't be experience. This is what the Buddha called passa, or this is because of what the Buddha called passa. Passa means contact. Passa. So without contact, there is no experience. I don't know what else to say about that. They're 2 different things. Clearly, consciousness is one aspect of the experience, and the object is another aspect, like the physical object usually is another aspect of it. It's possible that the mind takes a mental object, but that's more just the mind giving rise to a thought about a previous mental object, right? You have the mental experience, and then you have one experience, and then you have another experience that considers the earlier experience. But I'm not meaning to confuse you there. It's just that you have experiences, and essential in every experience is consciousness. You don't go looking for it. If there were no consciousness, there would be no experience. They're part and parcel of the same reality. They're really talking about the same thing. You become conscious of something. You're conscious of something. Or perhaps more accurate, you are conscious in a particular way. And that particular way can be, or is affected by the object, what we call the object. Here's a trap question. What would the Buddha? Not criticizing you, but it's it's a bit of a hard question. You've given me a difficult one. What would the Buddha say to his followers during a global panic like today's time? And of course, it should be obvious what the trap is. I'm not qualified to say what the Buddha would say to his followers. I can give some ideas, though. It's not a bad question by any means. It's a good question. It's just it's dangerous ground, right? Because now I have to somehow guess or ferret out what the Buddha would say when I'm not a Buddha. Some of the things the Buddha has said in regards to these sorts of things is not that there was anything of this magnitude at the time, but was to observe the state of the world and to not use it exactly, but to take it as a warning and to see reality through it. And it's the reality of uncertainty. Ita pasati manglokang chittang rajaratupamang yatha balinis. We see, I can't remember. Look at this world. Eta pasati manglokang. Come, look at this world. All decked out like a royal chariot that the fool plunges into, but the wise find no refuge or something, find no comfort. So the world appears to be so attractive and so wonderful and so full of good things to experience, but the wise don't cling to it. So in a time like this, it reminds us of this. Reminds us of this reality that you never know really what's going to happen. Of course, on a more practical, I mean that's just as an extra. That sort of reflection is useful and important. But on a more practical level, of course, it's to try and deal with your own feelings of panic, your own feelings of anxiety. Your own suffering at a time like this. What does the Pali Canon say about suicide? It's canon with one end, not two ends. Sorry to be nitpicky. I mean, I don't really want to go into sort of technical questions, but because suicide is such an important topic, just talk about it briefly. So the Pali Canon doesn't talk a lot about suicide. There's some talk in the Vinaya about it, and there's mention of it. There's stories of monks who committed suicide. And suicide is a bad thing, I think. It's not clearly spelled out, except the Buddha reprimands or puts down a rule against it. Monks are not allowed to. It's against the rules. But the point is, it's related to aversion generally. And if you die with that sort of aversive mind state, it's a very bad thing. You're very much likely to die and go to a bad place. Now, it's happened that when people were killing themselves, they woke up, as a result of their really bad act. They're doing something wrong, and as a result of the actual act of dying, they had this sudden clarity of how wrong-headed they were, and became enlightened as they were dying. Able to free themselves from the aversion. Death is something that is so profoundly out of our control, right? It shatters completely our sense of control, our sense of self. And so it's very powerful in terms of becoming enlightened. But that certainly is very different from saying that somehow suicide is a good thing, or that these people's suicide was the right thing. It was actually quite the opposite. The wrong-headedness of suicide is something you see clearly as you're dying. I tend to mindlessly browse the internet compulsively and cannot control myself. This same general issue makes it difficult to meditate. How can I regain control? It's a very important point. I mean, much of our attitude or our habits prevents us from actually meditating, let alone dealing with them or changing them. We can't even get to meditate. So saying practice meditation, well, our habits are not even letting us do that. But the answer is actually easier than it may seem. I mean, it seems like an impossible situation. How can meditation help you with things when these things are preventing you from meditating, right? The answer is, of course, to take these qualities as an object of meditation. I mean, here there's an important quality that you're sort of perhaps missing, and that's the desire to control. It's glaring here. Is as soon as you say something like control, you've touched upon you've triggered something in any Buddhist teacher, because they'll tell you, it's not about control. Trying to control is misleading. You want to tame the mind, you want to train the mind, you have to learn the nature of the mind, and the nature of the mind isn't amenable to control. And so the desire to control, usually accompanied by the aversion to the way things are out of control, those things are what you have to deal with first and foremost. And you'll see that your problems become less problematic when you stop problematizing them. When you stop seeing things as problems, wanting to change them, disliking them. And so take those as an object of meditation. Don't worry so much about browsing the internet compulsively. Worry more about the stress that comes from, and the guilt and so on that comes from them. Once you've included that in your realm of meditation, then you can start to really objectively deal with things like browsing the internet, because there are qualities of mind associated with it, like desire, craving for some entertainment value. And then you can focus on that. You can also be mindful when you're browsing the internet, which will support your meditation. Just being aware. Here we're practicing it right now. So hopefully you're not browsing right now. If anyone is also browsing Facebook while they listen to me, they're doing it all wrong. You should not be doing that. You have incorrectly understood the correct way to engage with this stream, and that is to close your eyes and listen mindfully. If you're not doing that, you're doing it wrong. You're doing this wrong. So here we have, we're teaching how to be mindful in regards to the internet. Being aware of the feeling of your body against the chair, the heat and the cold. And mindful of the sounds and the sights, seeing, hearing, and so on. Don't worry about regaining control. Simply put, try and learn about both the experiences and your reactions to them. When I was meditating, I felt a tingle in my leg while simultaneously hearing the birds chirp. Should I feel disconnected with these things, or should I feel at one with them? There's no should. You shouldn't. See, should I feel is like, should I experience this or experience that? And that's not how it works. You might feel disconnected from them at times. You might feel at one with them at times, and that's totally not the practice. I mean, it's irrelevant which one you feel. What you should do is be mindful both of the experiences, the tingling, say to yourself, tingling, tingling. The chirping, say to yourself, hearing, hearing. And the feeling about them. If you feel disconnected, feeling, feeling. If you feel at one with them, also feeling, feeling. Go ahead and read the booklet if you haven't yet. Would you advise shocking the system in some way outside of sits in order to speed up the development of mindfulness? Well, first of all, I'd recommend walking and sitting as opposed to just sitting. But that's not your question. No, I don't think so. I wouldn't advise shocking the system in some way, because the intentional shocking of the system is productive of habits of trying to shock, trying to trigger. And that habit is going to be different from being mindful of things as they are. It's in the category of activities that are trying to change, that are trying to bring about some different experience. Mindfulness isn't that sort of activity. Mindfulness is about changing the way we perceive and react to experiences that do exist. Would it be improper if someone entered a meditation practice with no aspiration for enlightenment or some moment of acute change of awareness, just doing it for its own sake? I mean, to some extent, that's very appealing. I don't know if I'd want to. I don't think so. I think no. I think the answer is. I think yes. That would be somewhat improper. I just think you're hitting upon something important here, that there has to be a sort of a dichotomy. I think it's important to have as your aspiration enlightenment. I mean, I think it's important to have a clear sense of what you're doing and why. But the difficulty is that should not interfere with this sense of just doing it for its own sake. So I think you shouldn't abandon the goal entirely. It just shouldn't be a goal the problem is not that we have goals. The problem is that we let our goals eclipse our actual practice. You see? So having the goal is important. Why? Because it's intellectual, it's abstract, it's conceptual, and that's going to keep you focused, keep you coming back to meditate. If the goal is X, then you have to figure out what it is that leads to X, and the answer here is meditation leads to enlightenment. So it'll keep you coming back to meditate. That's the benefit of it. But we use goals, as I say, they eclipse the practice by becoming our practice. We sit, and instead of practicing, we say, when am I going to become enlightened? Am I closer to becoming enlightened? Am I more enlightened now? No. And all of that is very, very bad. And so it's not that you should enter in a meditation practice with no aspiration. It's that you should enter it with aspirations, but you should practice it without aspirations. And I hope you see the difference. Would you recommend yoga with meditation practice? Do I need to understand the body in order to understand the mind? Okay. I don't think that yoga helps you understand the body. So the answer to the first one is no. And the answer to the second one is yes. You do need to understand the... technically you probably don't, but practically, absolutely. You need to understand the body in order to understand the mind. Why technically? Because technically I think you could just focus on the mind. It's just really a bad idea because the body is so prevalent and glaring that you'd just be ignoring a very important part of experience. So use the body to understand the mind is the best way. But yoga isn't what does that. Yoga is a Hindu practice. It really is. And so it's based in a different philosophy. So the understanding that comes is going to be basically, on a basic level, it's probably pretty similar. But as it progresses, it doesn't bear any resemblance to mindfulness. It doesn't bear a strong resemblance anyway. It's not mindfulness. Now, you could be practicing yoga and being mindful, I think, but it's problematic because yoga has certain goals and yoga has certain intentions, to feel certain things, to feel good, I guess. And that can get in the way when you want to feel certain things. Even just, it's not, yoga isn't evil or anything, it's just not mindfulness. It's like physical exercise of any kind, martial arts, Tai Chi, they are not mindfulness. Suppose one chooses to cultivate concentration and mindfulness simultaneously. Is it appropriate to use one object for samatha and a different one for vipassana? Well, our practice is the cultivation of concentration and mindfulness simultaneously. But not to be obtuse, you're probably referring to jhanas and that sort of thing. I don't think it's ever proper to use two different objects during the same period of time in the way that you're suggesting. But if you want to practice samatha first, then yeah, I think the nostrils would be a better object. And then if you want to practice vipassana afterwards, I think, yeah, the abdomen would be a better object for that. If you want to do both together, then just practice what I teach, because I think it's both samatha and vipassana. Is curiosity a bad thing? Yeah, pretty much. It's caught up in craving, desire, excitement, all those things. If two people were meditating and tiny sound occurred and one noticed it and the other didn't, was the one that didn't less mindful? Not necessarily. One notices something because the mind is attentive to that sense. I mean, quite likely if the person didn't notice it, they were distracted by thought, but not necessarily. Their mind was somewhere else. Could have been very mindful somewhere else. I've heard insight meditation can be quite a bumpy road. After having finished the at-home course, how does one continue practicing without the guidance of a teacher? Well, the next step, our at-home course is designed to be an introduction to the intensive course. So the next step is to go and do an intensive course. Of course, that's not possible pretty much anywhere now, I think, because everywhere's closed. So maybe if this continues on, if we can't host meditators, even if we can, it's something that we might have to look at. How do we support long-term meditators? I think these sort of sessions and the videos I put out are to that end, but honestly, there's not much I can do. There's not much I can say. It's hard, and the something that should make you really freak out is that you may not make it. You may slip. It may slip away. I don't have an answer for that. Why? Because it's ultimately got to be that way. No matter how much outreach you have, no matter how many people I reach or someone reaches with their teachings, there's going to be those people who internalize it and get enough of the teaching to continue on their own. And then there's always going to be those people at the fringe, and it's a fairly large fringe, who don't internalize it, who aren't able to get enough teaching, enough help to internalize it and continue on their own. So that that in and of itself should really freak you out and make you really, really want to be one of those in the former group. And that's that sort of thing that really leads people to take drastic measures, like go into a meditation center or go off and become a monk even, or that sort of thing, right? But at this point it becomes very difficult, and so many of us were negligent before this pandemic. In a time when we could have done that, we didn't do it. Or there was just, for many people there was just something in our way before. Maybe there's still something in our way now. And again, I can't actually help you with that. And there is potentially no answer. You may be stuck, and many people are going to be, even if they hear this talk, this session tonight, they may be out of luck. That's scary, right? There is no happy ending. This isn't a movie where the ending happens as it should. The upside is, having been such a downer, the upside is, unlike a movie, it has no end. And so you're not doomed by any means. I'm not really answering a question, but the broader implications of it. Having practiced, let's focus on the example. If you have finished the at-home course, hopefully if you've actually done the meditation, if we've gone through it, I'm assuming you have, take your word for it. But the good that take a meditator's word for it, because when I meet with them, I can't verify that they're actually doing it. Not on a deep level. But you absolutely, you've gained something from it. And that's changed you. And that sort of thing stays with you, not just in this life, but after you pass away and pass on to another world. and carry it life after life after life. And when the next Buddha arises, if in the next 2000 and some years that the Buddhist sasana is supposed to last, if you don't gain deeper realization, this sort of refuge or stability, this self-assurance, this independence, if you don't gain that, then when the next Buddha comes, maybe you'll be able to gain it then. Much more likely, because you've already had the basis, you've already cultivated some good qualities. It's much quicker once you've done it before, even in a far past life. And if you don't, in another future Buddha, in the time of another future Buddha, it's also possible that it will, the seed that you've planted will sprout spontaneously on its own in some lifetime and grow, and you'll become what we call a Pacceka Buddha, someone who becomes enlightened without any help, just on their own in some barren time when there's no Buddha around to teach. So, even though it may seem like some people don't practice, because the answer really is, well, keep practicing, right? But if it's hard to practice and you find it yourself falling away from the practice, take heart in the fact that you've done practice and that there is no time limit on the Dhamma, even though death is fast approaching. Death isn't the end. And so you work as best you can before death, knowing that it's uncertain where you're going to go when you die, but you also have a sense that you're not doomed, no matter how bad things are. Even Devadatta is not doomed, if you know who he is. Should I note something that I observe as a reaction, as conditioned or sankhara? Would that be an example of noting dhammas? Can you also use impermanent and forcing, controlling, striving? No. Yes to the last one, no to the rest. These are your interpretations of things. Even though they might be right, it's an interpretation, it's not the actual experience, and that's not mindfulness. When you say to yourself, for example, conditioned, you're interpreting. You're describing, and we don't want to describe. We want to identify. So the thing that you observe, a reaction, for example, should be noted as that reaction. If it's liking or disliking, it should be noted as liking or as disliking. That's Dhamma. Those are Dhammas. If you say to yourself impermanent, you're not actually focusing on the object anymore. That's like, there's just, doesn't make any sense in English, but Lumpur Chodok called that vipassanuk. Nuk means to think. Vipassanuk, not vipassana. But you can note forcing, controlling, and striving, because that's at least close to the experience. I think better than that would be something like feeling tense, because forcing is just still kind of an interpretation of the experience, but it's not wrong, it's not bad. It's just maybe not best. Best would be to focus on the actual experience, like tense or excited or something. Thank you all. Good questions tonight. First of all, very few that I've had to skip or that I felt like skipping, and I apologize to those who I did skip if you feel slighted. It may not be your fault. Sometimes they're good questions, they're just not contextually the sort of questions I'm into asking. And thank you all for your positive feedback. Nobody has said tonight or most nights, hey, your videos really are terrible, stop making them. Which I would welcome if it were true, if someone really felt that. But all this positive feedback, I thank you, appreciate it. Appreciate your appreciation, First, not just, it's not personal. It's not like of me, I feel good that I'm appreciated. No, the appreciation of the teaching, because just that is encouraging. The fact that people appreciate the Dhamma. It's encouraging because it tells me that, okay, to some extent, I'm probably teaching good things. So I'm not wrong. It's good to hear that sort of feedback. If someone said, look, you don't understand the Dhamma, you're all wrong. I might have to, I'll take it with a grain of salt, but at least appreciate that I might be wrong. But no, it's good to know that I'm on the right track teaching. But more importantly, or more obviously, is just that you are appreciating the teaching, and that there are people out there who appreciate Buddhism and the Buddha's teaching and meditation practice specifically, because some people just appreciate it intellectually, and that's not so good. So, thank you all. 94 people watching, that's what it says, and that's great. Welcome, everyone. If you haven't read my booklet, read it. I'm not promoting myself, it's just that often, the best way to have good questions here is to have an understanding of the context, and that booklet really does that. That's the whole point. It's not that I want more people to read my booklet, although I think, in some sense, yes, absolutely, but the reason for pushing it on you is because, well, it'll help you understand, it'll help you get into the frame of the state of the frame of reference, the frame of mind, to understand what I'm talking about and to really benefit from the sorts of things I'm talking about. I'm going to end it soon, so I see that there's actually still a ton of questions. Try to get through them as many as I can. If you could all just stop asking now, maybe that would help. Save your future questions for later, for the next session. Should be Saturday. When you mention the Buddhist texts, please always spell the name of the authors. They are so exotic to many of us. It's a good point. But I need a moderator, maybe. I need someone who can spell them for me. I'm too busy answering questions. If you can approximate it, you could always send me a message somehow, or find a way to... what you could do is try and get it down as best you can, or even actually if you reference this video to someone, you can go to our Discord. We have a Discord server, and you could reference a time and say, what was he saying at this moment? And people there will be able to help you for sure. Most of them are not that esoteric. I'm going to skip a bunch, and I'm sorry for some of them, but read my booklet if you haven't, and you should be able to get some idea. Meditation. For example, asthma or lung problems that give you more anxiety. So they don't give you anxiety. If you become anxious about them, you should note the anxiety. Say to yourself, anxious, anxious. And of course, note the feelings as well. Note the asthma, the tension, and the lung problems. They're just feelings. Read my booklet, many of these. And if they're not about meditation, they may be good questions, but I'm kind of going to skip them. Okay, this person is going on a timeout, not actually because their questions are bad, but because there's too many of them and they're not really related to meditation. Too bad that it deletes all the questions. Oh, I can still view them. Okay. Well, like that person, it's just maybe they should focus more on meditation questions. Is there any value in trying a meditation technique outside of the Theravada tradition? There probably could be. I wouldn't recommend it just because you never know. It's hard to know what the benefit is. I would recommend Buddhist meditations much more. There's just so many of them. Buddhism is like the meditation religion. I mean, it really is. We have so many practices and such a rich textual encyclopedia of meditation techniques that there's no need to look elsewhere. Why would you, really? So again, I'm skipping some that I might have answered otherwise, but I'm going to try to stick to important ones. Here's a good one. One that I like to answer because it's often overlooked. How do meditation instructions change after the basic instruction? And the point that they do is an important point. They do change. So when I say read my booklet, I forget to tell you also, qualify that with the booklet only gives you the first basic instruction in our tradition. And we have other exercises, other practices, or extrapolations on that basic practice that are important, and that's why the at-home course. So I'm not going to tell you how they change. I'm just going to say, if you're interested, take our at-home meditation course by going to our website and looking it up and signing up. We meet once a week, and I'll take you through all the changes. Hi, Elaine. Hope you're doing well too. And Abby and your granddaughter. Granddaughter, I think. Hope you're all doing well. Okay, last question. How can I practice detachment from other people and loved ones? I mean, practice meditation would be a sort of a simplistic answer. But it's difficult, and I think the point here is, as with many questions like this, it's not so much about practicing detachment as it is about observing your attachments. We're not trying to detach. And the point here is that it's an important point, you never practice detachment. Get this into your psyche, into your understanding of Buddhism. You don't practice detachment. You practice mindfulness. Very, very different, right? Very different. And it doesn't seem obvious that one leads to the other, but it absolutely does. The word mindfulness is misleading a bit because it's banal. It's too obvious. It's too simple. That's why I like remembrance, which is what sati really means, because the word remembrance isn't immediately evident what it means, right? But so it pulls you in to try and understand what is meant. When you hear remembrance, you have to take the next step of understanding, what does that mean? Remembrance, to remember things as they are. Remember what the things you experience actually are by reminding yourself, which is what we do with the mantra, with the word. So you practice sati in relation to your attachment to people and loved ones, without any idea that that it should go away, the attachment should go away, right? Without any idea that you should become detached. You observe it. So not without any, so as I said earlier, it's good to have a sense that you're trying to attain a state of freedom from attachment. So objectively, you know that that's the goal, to be free from clinging. But don't let that interfere with your practice. Your practice should have nothing to do with that. Not directly. Your practice should be just wanting, liking, that sort of thing. When you're worried about your relatives, your people and loved ones, worried. When you're afraid, and so on. And don't expect it to go away, Don't expect it absolutely to go away quickly by any means. Attachment to people is something that probably will last your whole life and many lifetimes to come, unless you're very, very dedicated to the practice. But learning about it is going to help you purify yourself in relation to it. You'll have much purer. You'll worry less about other people, absolutely. You'll become afraid for them much less. You'll become upset by them. These loved ones are not acting lovable, are not acting the way I want them to act. All of that will go away. But the clinging is, it may take a long time to actually be free from any kind of attachment to loved ones. In the meantime, you can purify it. You chip away at the edges. You make it more smooth, more refined. And that's what sati is really all about. It's about refining. You become more and more refined until you see clearly. And when you see clearly, you let go. When you let go, you're free. When you're free, you say, I'm free. Nothing left to do. That's all for tonight. Last question, what time will I be live on Saturday? I don't promise to be live anytime. I think I may be live. I think I will be live on Saturday at 8 o'clock my time, which is when I go on usually these days. I know 8 o'clock may not be the best time. It fits best into my schedule at this time. I know for Europeans it's a bad time. For Asians it's probably atrocious. No, in Asia I suppose it's early morning. That's good. Europeans have the hard luck. But I went from 9 to 8. So 8 plus 6 is 2 a.m. for many of you probably. 2 a.m., 1 a.m., 3 a.m. Something to think about. In some ways, 10 p.m. might be better because it's already early morning for you. Get up early. 3 a.m. for some people. Wow, that's dedication. I appreciate that you've come. Let me know if you have suggestions, if you'd like me to, if it would really be important. And you can talk to us on Discord and suggest that, hey, would you consider broadcasting at another time because I missed it, and I miss it every time because it's just impossible. And I'll think about it, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., good for you. Thank you for coming. Best wishes, everyone. May you all find peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Have a good night.